A lion does not roar before it attacks, and the strongest man does not need to speak to intimidate others. There are those who try to intimidate with noise, with explosive emotional threats. But true power is not loud. It is quiet, unpredictable, and controlled. And that is why it is scary. Because what you cannot predict, you cannot control. And what you cannot control, you fear. In this world, the scariest person is not the one who talks the most. It is the one who says nothing but still owns the room. The one whose silence is not, "I do not care," but "I see everything, and I do not need to react." That is the kind of temperament we will be cultivating today. Not with tricks, not with words, but with 6 inner states inspired by ancient Stoic philosophy. Each state is designed to make your opponent wary of your every move. They won't know what you're up to. They won't understand who you are, and that's why they'll be afraid of you. Let's begin. A. Power of silence. They expect a reaction, a wince, an explosion, but instead you give them silence, and that's when everything changes. Most people will fight back. It's instinctive. Offended, they will defend themselves. Threatened, they will explain. Provoked, they will explode. But that's not power. That's letting others control you. When your opponent gets to choose your emotions, they win, because they've taken away your peace. When you get angry, when you defend yourself, you're telling them, "You touched me." That's what they want. But imagine this. You don't move, you don't speak, you don't blink. You just stare back at them calmly, unreadably. Suddenly they don't know what's going to happen next. Suddenly they feel exposed. That's what's scary. It's not the noise, it's the silence. Because in silence, you force your opponent to face their own weakness. You hold up a mirror and make them look into it. They want chaos, you give them silence. They want drama, you give them space. And space never lies. The philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it that matters." And when you don't react, when you maintain focused control, you're not weak. You're proving that you've won the internal battle mind. I once knew a quiet man, of average appearance, who never raised his voice. One day, in a conference room, a colleague deliberately humiliated him in front of everyone, called him old-fashioned, mocked his ideas. The man did not argue, did not even respond. He just looked at his opponent and asked, "Done yet?" and then returned to his nature and continued working. The whole room was silent. The attacker suddenly became small. That silence did not say, "I am weak." It said, "You cannot move me. You do not have the right to define who I am." And that shattered the opponent more than any response could. The unmovable person is the untouchable person. The person who does not need to prove anything becomes the most intimidating aura in the room. So practice your silence. Master the moment to pause to weigh the screaming while you remain still. Because in a world that lives by reaction, refusing to respond is the scariest move of all. 2. Invulnerability has a kind of invulnerability that doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't announce itself with loud voices, charisma, or drama. It's just there, calm, steady, unshakable. And that alone makes it scary. Because most people are loud. They pour anxious energy into the space, talk too much, move too fast, try too hard. They need attention like oxygen, need recognition like water. They try to dominate space without realizing that real power doesn't need to dominate. It just needs to take a stand. Doesn't need to apologize because it's been honed, doesn't have to be acted out. There's something unsettling about a man who doesn't waver, doesn't need to explain himself, doesn't chase smiles or recognition. He just stood there, alert but still, present but untouchable. And in that stillness, the whole room began to change. People lowered their voices around him. They spoke more carefully. They glanced at him before finishing their sentences. Not because he demanded it, but because his energy quietly imposed it. It was power. Not the kind that shouted, not the kind that demanded, but the kind that radiated from within, built of discipline, clarity, and restraint. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to become someone different from the person who hurt you." The person with the air of invulnerability not only ignores his enemies, he rises so high that they no longer know how to reach him. That's why they fear him. I once knew a man named Fong. He wasn't tall, unpretentious, rarely smiling, but when he walked into a room, people noticed, not because he tried, but because he didn't need to. He walked slowly, spoke only when necessary, maintained enough eye contact to make others pause. Every gesture, every word, every moment of silence was intentional. Even when he said nothing, you felt like you had just heard something important. He worked in an industry full of egos, where lectures were loud and people argued to prove their intelligence, but Fong was quiet. He waited until everyone was exhausted, and then asked a question, usually no more than one. And suddenly the room went from noisy to precise, not just because of what he said, but because of how he said it. No unnecessary movements, no extra emotions. He was proof that in a reactive world, silence was a threat. People began to fear his silence because it was unpredictable, because it meant you are observing, calculating, timing. And the people who fear you most are not the ones who scream, but the ones who can't predict what you'll do next. That's what invulnerability is all about. It keeps enemies off balance, makes manipulators wary, makes the loudest voices humble themselves in your silence. So how do you build this air? Stop acting, stop chasing attention. Slow your breathing, straighten your back, observe more than you speak, and practice doing nothing until your silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. Because a man deeply rooted in purpose, clarity, and restraint doesn't need to move fast. He makes the world slow down to meet him. And when that happens, you no longer have to assert power. You become it. 3. Don't mind insults. People insult you not always because they hate you. Sometimes it is because they are afraid of you, afraid of what you represent, afraid of your progress, of your calmness, of your refusal to play by their emotional rules. They attack not with their fists, but with their words. Not to win, but to provoke. Because the truth is that insults are not truths. They are about control. They want to upset your balance, to see if they can break your pace, to feel powerful by making you react. But the moment you respond, you have given them what they want.
No matter how clever your response, no matter how justified your anger, if your peace is taken away, even for a second, they have won. But when you do not waver, do not explain, do not even acknowledge the insult, it will echo in their head much louder than in yours. Because silence in the face of an attack is not weakness, it is a judgment. A cold, calm declaration. You don't deserve a response. And there's nothing more humiliating than being ignored by someone you're trying to hurt. I once knew a woman named Lynn, who worked in a scandalous office environment where gossip and subtle attacks were the currency of status. There was one particularly spiteful, jealous colleague who was determined to bring Lynn down. The initial insults were subtle, sarcastic compliments, barely audible whispers. The sarcasm in meetings was disguised as, "Just kidding!" But Lynn never took the bait. She smiled gently, took notes, focused on her work, and walked out of the room with the same composure as she had entered. Gradually, a strange thing happened. The attacker grew louder, more vicious, more desperate to provoke a reaction. But the louder she got, the smaller she became. One day, people stopped laughing, stopped listening. Because when you're constantly staring at a wall that won't budge, you start to look ridiculous. Lynn did not fight back. She did not expose her enemy. She just stood there, and let the other person collapse under the weight of their own insecurities. That is what the Stoic philosophy teaches us. Let the fools reveal themselves. Let the insults fall into the void before your silence. Let the attacker collapse under the weight of their own weakness. Epictetus wrote, "If someone speaks ill of you, instead of defending yourself, say clearly that he does not know me well." In other words, never give your enemy the satisfaction of an explanation. Do not give them your anger, do not give them your clarity, give them your silence. For the one who does not defend himself is either defeated or has gone so far beyond the fight that the fight never reaches him. Be the latter. Let your silence speak for itself. Let your dignity be something they cannot break. And the next time someone insults you, smile. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because it doesn't reach the important place. 4. Mystery is power. People fear what they can't predict. This no one admits. But the moment you become unpredictable, you become dangerous. Because control starts with information about your fears, your ambitions, your habits. Your habits, your weaknesses are all traps in the hands of others. The more you talk, the more you explain, the more they listen. Not to understand you, but to map you, to know how to move you, to sway you, to manipulate you. But when you hold back, when you act without declaration, without justification, you become a problem they cannot solve, a question they cannot answer, a storm they cannot predict, and that is scary. You do not need to lie or deceive, you just need to keep a distance between who you really are and what they know. The Stoicists understand this. They do not live loudly, do not flaunt their desires to the world. They act with a purpose that does not need to be public. They share what is necessary, but never reveal everything, because everything revealed can be exploited. Seneca once wrote, "Knowing when to speak and when to be quiet is a wonderful thing. Sometimes silence is not only wisdom, but also a protective armor." I once met a quiet and disciplined person named CP, who never shared too much. When people asked him personal questions, he smiled, answered softly, and then changed direction. Not cold, not evasive, just calm. Some people called him mysterious, others said he was arrogant. But over time, those same people began to respect him. Why? Because they couldn't understand him. They didn't know what made him angry, what made him insecure, or what he really wanted. So they couldn't use that against him. And when the pressure came, when the office drama exploded, when rumors spread, CP was still untouchable, because no one knew his emotional levers. He moved like a shadow, and they feared what he might do next simply because they didn't know what he was capable of. That was the power of mystery. The enemy cannot break what they cannot touch, and they cannot touch what they do not understand. To build this armor, stop recounting your every move. Don't announce every goal. Don't give others access to every corner of your mind. Let them guess. Let them be curious. Let them strive for a pattern that does not exist outside your will. Because a person who keeps something to himself is not hiding weakness, he is protecting his strength. 5. Acts of silence. In a world obsessed with declarations, action becomes rare and frightening. People announce their next plans, their goals, their habits, their changes and upgrades. They talk about what they will do before they actually do it. And they confuse attention with progress. But the truth is, the more you talk, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you become, the more deterred you become. But a person who acts in silence, builds without announcing, planning without promising, he becomes unstoppable. For when the world realizes everything too late, the other technocrats do not care about speeches. They do not post daily affirmations or boast about their qualities. They live it quietly, fiercely with discipline. They understand that action without noise is the clearest form of self-respect. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, live it." Let others explain, let them sell the dream, let them chase the praise of the idea of success, while you pursue that success yourself. I once knew a woman named Trin, intelligent, ambitious, but so quiet as to be almost invisible. While her colleagues boasted about new projects, promotions, and side jobs, Trin just kept her head down and worked. At first, no one paid attention to her. They thought she was weak, passive, even forgettable. Until one day her name was mentioned as the person who built a system that saved millions. Suddenly, everyone turned to look. But by then, she was gone, promoted, transferred to a position no one saw coming because they were too busy talking. That is what silent action does. It shifts power without warning.
It produces results without explanation, and it stuns your opponents. Not because they didn't see you coming, but because they forgot to take you seriously until it was too late. To practice this power, close the door, work so that your efforts resonate in silence. Don't warn others, don't predict your greatness, don't overpromise. Just disappear into action and reappear with results. Because when you act without warning, you not only avoid opposition, you create fear. Not because of what you say you will do, but because of what you might do next. 6. Be true to yourself. There is something unsettling about someone who doesn't need validation in a world built on likes, accolades, and social adjustment. Most people learn to drink themselves in, edit themselves, and tone down their voices to remain likable. They smile when they don't want to, nod when they don't agree, blur their truth just to avoid conflict. That's why people who don't do that become a threat. Ouch. Not because he is cruel or confrontational, but because he reminds people how much they have compromised. Authenticity is confrontational, especially with people who are not authentic. I once knew a man named Duck. He is not loud, not sharp, but has a way of making others feel insecure without trying. He speaks clearly, but does not adjust his tone to please anyone. He does not follow trends, but what he likes, says what he thinks. When others gossip, he stays quiet, not out of fear, but out of principle. Some people avoid him, saying he is too stressed or thinks he is better. But deep down, they feel pressure not from him, but from the fact that they cannot do as he does. He is just himself, no apologies, no changes, and that is stronger than any rebellion. The philosophy of the caricature teaches, live according to your nature, not according to the expectations of the world or the mood of the crowd. Just live with dignity, integrity, and consistency. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste time arguing about what a good person should be. Be that person. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to match the energy of the room. You don't even need to be understood. You just need to be real. And in a world full of drama, realness becomes scary. To be that kind of force, stop apologizing for who you are. Don't dilute yourself to be accepted. Don't hide your sharpness, your pace, or your clarity just to make others comfortable. Speak less and mean more. Say no when you need to say no. Walk away when it's over. And never apologize for the standards you set, as long as you set them for yourself first. Because when you become the version of yourself that doesn't waver, doesn't change for attention, doesn't act for applause, you don't just walk with peace, you walk with pressure. The kind of silent pressure that makes weaker people adjust their masks before you even see them. The end discussion, silent power. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to beg for respect. And yet they hesitate, they're wary, they're afraid of what you might do, because you give them nothing to read, but everything to feel. You don't fight the enemy, you become the one who makes the enemy uneasy just by existing. No noise, no drama, just a silence forged from self-mastery. The scariest person in the room isn't the one who talks a lot, it's the one who doesn't need to. So, don't shout. Don't explain. Don't rush to be seen. Let your silence speak. Let your boundaries resonate. Let your silence do damage they never foresee. And when they finally understand who you are, you'll be gone, quietly focused and invulnerable. If this awakens something deep within you, if you feel the shift to becoming a silent power, leave a comment. I don't explain anymore. I just act.
and follow not because we asked you to, but because you are ready to stop being mediocre. Welcome to the world of quiet power.